So I've got mounds of cardboard to walk on here because it's easier on my feet if I'm not always walking on the same concrete. So, I just took a bad step there. Okay. Okay, this is Math 161 pre-calculus. Number one thing I'm going to say, I'm going to have homework every night, or pretty much, for every class. And portion of the class who make spectacular scores on their homework and can't come in and do a quiz on the same thing the next day. Okay? Yeah, that's your choice, but you're setting yourself up for failure if you do that. AI can be used to help you learn the material. You can say, hey, AI, I'm having trouble on this assignment because I don't really understand the laws of exponents. Can you help me understand the laws of exponents? And it will. And it'll probably do a pretty darn good job of it. Okay? Or you can go over to the Mark Tutoring Center. Or there's BrainFuse online tutoring. You can send me an email or come by and find me. Okay? Laws of exponents are part of algebra. Because for this course is intermediate algebra. Okay. So we find a lot of people end up in this course without a very good knowledge of algebra. For that reason, number one, we do have the MDE 61, which is a support course on this course. And most people really need to be in that, but some people just don't have time to put it in their schedule. Other thing, as you're going to see today, you're going to learn to draw some pictures, some shapes that are fundamental to this course and don't require algebra. And we bring the algebra in a little more gradually, but you're going to have to get the algebra. Okay? I can't teach you the algebra. There isn't time. And almost everybody who comes into this course has some deficiencies in algebra. There are people with 160 IQs out there, and that there are different species. A few of those come across through here. But on the whole, you're going to need to be aware that you need to address the algebra sometimes. Okay, as I say, we're going to start easing you into that, maybe even today a little bit. Algebra doesn't get really tough in this course till about late October. And hopefully by then, everybody will have themselves on track. Again, AI can be a great help. Okay. Not to do your problems for you, but to help you learn it. Now you have a lot of resources. Few seconds. something's really wrong here. I keep getting messages that my internet connection's unstable. And then everything's really slow, but it's coming up. Okay. Now, okay, I could look, but I'm not gonna. I haven't looked at what the enrollment in this course is, but let's see, I see what, 6, 11, 16 people here. Last I looked at the roster, there were 18 on the roster. First day of classes, there were some people have conflicts and stuff like they don't make it. It's not a good idea not to make the first class. Okay, but everybody needs to do that like today. Midnight. And it's a 15-minute assignment if it takes that. How many of you done the introduction to open math? Okay. 15 minutes or more? More, less, about less. Okay. Yeah, that's usually what people tell me. Okay. It's not difficult, but it shows you how to use the thing. And then there'll be an assignment due tomorrow. Another one. Actually, I can get confused between courses because courses are so similar here. Yeah, actually, there's not an open math assignment until Friday and then Saturday, and those are just review assignments. One of them's on fractions, one of them's on exponents, things that you're supposed to know, okay? The prerequisites. Most of you are going to need a review of some of that. How do you add fractions? You know, fractions are taught in 5th grade. Then they put a calculator in your hand and you never do fractions again, okay? So people come in usually pretty badly prepared on fractions. That becomes a handicap when we deal with fractions of polynomials, which is in late October. And that's where the algebra gets a little bit intense. Okay. So you want to make sure you understand fractions right from the very beginning. You're going to be using exponents throughout the course. You got to be sure you understand exponents. Okay. So those are review assignments. The other assignments are going to be assignments that are given on the assignments page. How many of you seen the assignments page? Is it easy to get to? All you got to do is read the directions in Canvas and follow them, right? I'm not going to tell you how to get to the assignments page. If you can't get to the assignments page, send me a copy of the directions you're trying to follow and tell me what part of the directions is going haywire. Okay. And I'll get you straightened. Okay. I don't mind doing that. But don't say, hey, how do you get to the assignments page? I want to see the directions you're following. I want to know that you're following directions. So you simply need to know what it means to follow directions. I think everybody does. So, but I kind of have to say that. All right. How many of you understood every one of the objectives? Give you on Thursday isn't going to include all those objectives. They won't mean, many of them won't mean anything to you at this point. You just go online. You can see what those objectives are. So the way the class is gonna run, you're generally gonna have homework. You'll always have homework. You're gonna come in, you're gonna have a quiz over the stuff you did for homework. I look at that quiz, I kind of circulate around, look what you're doing as you're taking it. Get an idea of some things people might not be getting that I need to talk about. So I can talk about those. And then we go on to new material. Going to get that 5% and not much else. Okay. And 5% ain't going to get it for you. Okay. And, if you can somehow learn the material without doing the homework, so you can pass the tests, it's possible, but it's probably the toughest way to do it. Depends. Different people have different ways of learning. But the bottom line then is tests are going to be the majority of your grade. Okay. The quizzes you take in class are going to be 10%. Okay. So there you have it. So your task is, by the time you leave class, you ought to have a good handle on how to start your homework, at least. A good introduction to your homework, the main principles, the things you got to think about. Then you do the homework and you refine all that. Then you come in, you can pass the quiz. Okay. Then there's going to be a test eventually. And you want to prepare for the test. One thing that I've seen since COVID especially is that people are not very good at preparing for tests in general. Some people are, but most people whose work I see daily, make a much lower grade on their test than I would have expected if they'd have done a little preparation. I give you plenty of materials to prepare for. Of course, that's a time factor. But you have to get it together. You have to pull your knowledge together in order to perform well on a test. You can't just walk in and automatically get a good grade. Okay? And some people seem to, for one reason or another, expect that's going to work. Okay? It's not, at least not very well. Okay? I mean, some people are doing spectacularly, they'll pass the test, but 20 points lower than you would have anticipated. So we'll be talking about how to prepare for a test. Okay. You might even ask AI, hey, what's a good way to prepare for a math test? It'll tell you something maybe a little different than I do, maybe better, maybe worse, but probably going to give you useful advice. You got to decide. When AI gives you something, you got to decide whether it's any good or not. And the criterion for whether it's any good or not is whether you like it or not. No, it's whether it's going to work or not. Okay, whether it's what you want to believe or whether it's what really is. Okay. Breakdown is roughly 5% homework, 15%, 10% quizzes, and 85% tests. Okay. I think participation is in there too. You can look at the syllabus. I've revised it a couple of times, and I don't have it in front of me right now, but we'll see what the actual numbers are. You can read it. It's there. Okay. So engage the material, do the work, use whatever resources help you learn it, not whatever resources do the problems for you. Open Math has plenty of good resources. If there's a text, every section, there's a link to the text, you can read it. There are videos. Okay, typical problem set, maybe 15 problems. It can vary depending on the topic. It might be less, it might be more. But the first few problems are typically going to have videos with them. And use those videos to do the problems, okay? If you need to. Or use the text, look at text examples, do whatever. Then there are problems that don't have videos, and you hopefully something else. Just don't let it be AI solving the problem for you. Yourself be able to pass a quiz with similar problems. And I guarantee you they'll be similar. Sometimes I'll throw a little wild card in there, won't even necessarily grade it, or give you a little extra credit if you get it. You know, something that you might not be expecting, just to see if you can do that. Okay, so any questions at this point before we start doing pre-calculus? Okay, so what I'm going to want you to do with that piece of paper is orient the a vertical line, vertical oriented like this. This would be the vertical direction, the upward vertical. And this would be the horizontal direction. It's like a y-axis and an x-axis, except that's not what we're doing right now, okay? So I want you to draw a line, a vertical line right down the center of the page. Okay. Everybody manage that? Okay. Now, I want you to draw okay. Now, I want you to draw a line from the left edge to the center. Okay. So if you drew one from the left edge of the center, you did okay. So you, now this is, okay, what we're doing is it's like, this is a graph window. Like on a graphing calculator, you got a window, okay? There are no coordinates yet. Now what I want you to do is draw a horizontal line. Everything, if I can see where your pencils are. Okay, now, oh, it's gonna look like this, obviously. That's pretty much what it looks like, right? Okay, now I want another horizontal line halfway from that edge to the lower edge. Halfway from the one you just drew to the lower edge. You got that? Looks like you're doing one. Okay. Now, my previous instruction was go halfway from the last line to the lower edge, right? So I'm just gonna say repeat that instruction. In other words, go halfway from that line that you just drew to the lower edge. Okay? Then once more, halfway from the line you just drew to the lower edge. It'd be like that. And one final time, halfway from that to the lower edge. Now, if you're drawing it on paper, you would draw a rectangle. And I'm letting you do with a whole piece of paper, not complicating it with having to draw a rectangle. Fair enough? Okay. Now, I want you to make a mark right at the very left edge of your paper on the lowest line that you drew. Okay. On the left edge of the paper. It's gonna look like this, I'm seeing it. And this is really important because people screw up this part of the instruction all the time. All over. Okay. Now, if you're drawing it on paper, it would look like this. Okay, I'm using an X for the line, but you can use a dot, whatever. Okay. Now, from that point, can you move to the right one line and up one line and make a mark? Yeah, I'm not pretty sure everybody's gonna do this. Be careful, this is important. This is something that you're gonna be constructing in the next class. It's gotta be 100% right. It'll be an easy quiz. There'll be a little more to quiz, but that'll be easy. I'll put it easy. Okay. Okay. Just going to go one to the right, one line. Yeah, that's it. Okay, very good. Everybody got it? So one to the right and one up. Now from that point, repeat that instruction. And I'm gonna walk around, take a look. I'm gonna pause the video, and I apologize to anybody who's seen a lot of dead space if they're watching the video, but you would end up here. Okay, there are only 4 lines. It's okay. It's a perfectly valid graph the way you've drawn it, but the way we're going to draw the standard graph is like this with 4 lines. And then we're going to sketch a curve. And the curve you get for your points is as good as the curve I get for mine. The exponential shape. Letting myself room to write the word. But this has 4 construction lines. 1 here, 1 here, 1 here, 1 here. Somehow, and probably my fault, you ended up with 5. Okay. Makes sense? 4 construction lines. Horizontal. And 3 vertical construction lines. Make sense? Then we have to make sure you know what I mean by construction lines and boundary lines. Well, there are 4, but there are only 2 down here, so not sure what I was thinking. Might be the most important shape in mathematics. We're going to do a lot with it. One thing you can do let's suppose this boundary line is at x equals 12. You got an x-axis and a y-axis, right? And let's say this boundary line is at x equals Oh, 180. Okay, then what's X on this line? Now you have your whole sheet of paper. When I draw these, I like to draw them so that the boundary lines and construction lines extend outside the rectangle. So you're not cluttering up the inside of the rectangle with a bunch of labels. Okay, just makes it easier to label. Everybody okay with that? Okay, so my point now is if this is at x equals 12 and this is at x equals 28, what's x here? Now you could label these on your paper. You know, you could like put x equals 12 here with a little arrow to this, because you got plenty of room. You have to do it on your paper. You could do it here, x, e. I've got a question mark there. It's written kind of small, but right there in the center line. If x is 12 here and x is 28 here, what is x here? There are a number of ways you can get this, okay? But let's say you said x equals 18, and that's not right. How can you discover that's not right? Now, one person answered, said, well, you take the difference between these and take half of that and add it to this. Okay? And that's perfectly good and natural. You should understand that. But let's see how you could check. Let's say you did that and you got 18. I mean, you did some arithmetic wrong, but one way or another, you got 18 here, okay? So how could you check to see that that's not right? Well, distance from here to here has got to be the same as the distance from here to here because this line's down the center, right? Now, you didn't draw it exactly down the center, and neither did I, but you're close. You know, when I look at your papers, I can't tell if you're off to the right or left, okay? So it's pretty close. It's close enough for a hand sketched picture. You don't want to take all day to make the picture perfect because you're not gonna. You let a computer make a really pretty graph if you need a really pretty one. But if you need a graph to refer to on a piece of paper, you don't use a computer or anything. You sketch it because how long does it take to sketch this thing? Less than a minute if you practice a little bit. Okay. And you get down to where you can sketch it. I mean, you know, yeah, okay, 4 lines, there's a little, there's halfway there, there's halfway there. There, 1, 2, 3, 4, there, 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 there. There's my graph. I don't think that took much more than seconds. That's a pretty, yeah, not a great graph. And I had more room, I could have made it really nice. Okay. So you're saying that this distance is 6 and this distance is, okay. Now, there are a couple of ways to think about this. Halfway between two numbers, add them and divide by 2. That's one way to get it. You know, 12 and 28 is 40, divide by 2, you get 20, which is the correct answer. Most people had it. But I think I saw some people getting it by looking at somebody else's paper. You don't, that's like using AI. Don't do that. You make your own estimate and don't feel pressure to get the right answer at this point. You know, think it through. I'm going to explain it. Okay, so that's x equals 20, right? Okay. Then you could label these two. If you know where the boundary lines are, you could label all these lines, right? Okay. y equals 16 and y equals 48. Now I'm going to ask you, can you label the center line? And then can you label the line below that? Okay. I'm going to use a different color. Well, actually, I'm going to stick with blue, even though it's a little hard to read. Y is 16, y is 48. This line should be halfway between here and here. Okay. What's halfway between 16 and 48? Two ways to do it. If you subtract 16 from 48, you get 32. So it's 32 units from here to here. If you take half of that, 16. Should be 16 units from here to here. 16 and 16 is 32. And just to check, so now you know you're right. Unless you're, you need to do something to save your life, you just don't have time to write them down. Save your life, please. Okay. And then halfway between 16 and 32. Well, you need to know how to get a number halfway between two numbers, right? So I'm not going to belabor that, but halfway from 16 to 32 is 24. And here, could have used yellow, but y equals 20. And down here, there's really not room to squeeze it in, so I'll cheat and go over here. Halfway between 12 and 20 is 16. Halfway between 20 and 28, 24. Make sense? So what I want you to do now is I want you to draw the line x equals 23. Where do you think the line x equals 23 ought to be on this graph? Okay, where's the line x equals 23? Well, is 23 between 12 and 16? Between 16 and 20? Between 20 and 24? Yeah. Closer to 24 to 20. Closer to 24, right? Now, mark the point where the x equals 23 line intersects the curve. Where does the x 23 line hit the curve? Draw that point. Well, it's probably ought to be a little further over here. You see it, what you've done is okay. But this one looks almost the same as at almost the same level as section, right? Well, that's because when you drew it, you were getting higher. Yeah. Yeah, because if you remove it, it's close. That's not. So it's just- I don't know, it's about to go to this. Okay. Like that. Yes. You mark it. There it is. Okay. Now draw a line, horizontal line through that point. And you're going to label that line y approximately equals. I see that the line is between y equals 24 and y equals 32, somewhat closer to 32. So what do you think the y coordinate is at that point?
Oh, yeah. Perfect. Thank you so
Label
much.
your line y equals whatever you think the y coordinate is. The 20, 20 and 24, right? You're 24 and 32. I mean, this is. Well, that's one of the 24. Okay, that's 32 minutes. This is actually what's 23. That's 24. That's 36. It's exploding. Okay. Now, a couple of things. It's taken me a little while to see what you've got because not everybody is labeling it completely. So you want to get used to labeling completely. And the problem with that is, or the reason you want to label things completely on your homework, when you do graphs and pictures and stuff like that, is so you have all the information. And so if I look at it, I can see all the information without having to make a note and say, you're missing a lot of information there. Do it again. Okay, make sense? And you've been pretty well with this. But the reason we're doing all this, the reason we're going to all this trouble is because these are really important shapes. It's really important to be able to construct them. And then we've got to be able to do a lot of algebra with them. Okay. And we develop that algebra as we go. This turns out, the algebra for this one turns out to be something we don't do until a lot of times very late October, early November. But if I was making an approximation, it looks to me like if this is done, everything according to the way we've done it, that this is between 24 and 32. And somewhat closer to 32, halfway between 24 and 32 would be 28. And that's a little closer to 28 to 32. So my estimate is 27. Now, when you draw another one, just draw it carefully. Make sure you follow all the instructions. Okay. Okay, well, that's the exponential shape. And the lines that we drew, this is called a type 1 grid. Okay. There's one more thing on the type 1 grid. You don't have red, but you put a dot right in the middle of the lower edge. And that's your red dot. And that's the central point of this graph. That's the graph that corresponds to the origin of an XY system in a way that you'll see later. Okay. And the reason we're dealing with these numbers is I want you to be able to see numbers. You need to understand the numbers that come out of some of these things. And my experience has been in pre-calculus classes that people will, if I say the boundary lines are x equals 12 and x equals 28, people put 28 here and 12 here sometimes. Okay. And then they'll use the same distance between all the lines. They'll number this 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, or whatever. Okay. A lot of numbers that don't correspond to the picture. Now, y'all have done pretty well with that. Okay. So I'm pretty well pleased with what I see. Now, here, if we get this thing loose, come on. Here's a picture of the exponential graph. And here's a picture of what we call the quadratic graph. Okay. Quadratic graph is really easy to draw, and I'm going to show you how in just a couple of minutes. We have this picture here where I've labeled extended boundary lines. I said verticals this way, horizontals this way. The lines we draw inside are construction lines. The lines in the boundary are the boundary lines. So what I want you to do is take your second piece of paper and make a large square, but not too large. Leave yourself room around the boundaries. I would say a square, maybe about like so, to leave yourself an inch or two on the boundaries. Okay. And make the best square you can. You don't pull out a straight edge from this. You just learn to make straight lines. And if they're not straight, as long as construction is right, it's okay. Every time you make one, you're going to get better at it. Okay. And then I want you to make the same construction lines you made for this graph, okay? But we're going to add one or two construction lines too. Again, just slop it down. Don't use a straight edge, don't do anything. You know, you don't want to be able to draw these quickly freehand. You don't want to pull out grass and schools, transits and all that stuff. Now remember, if there were four horizontal lines on the graph that you drew originally. And some of you have five. Well, on this one, you are going to have five. This will be a type 2 graph. So look, what you constructed previously, you know, this line's halfway from the upper edge to the lower, in other words, in the middle. This line's halfway from that to the lower. This way's halfway to the lower edge. This is halfway to the lower edge. And you would draw one more halfway to the lower edge so that there'd be five lines using the same rule. Does that make sense? I'm going to actually do it for you. There it is, middle. Halfway from the left to the middle, right to the middle, halfway from the left to the middle. Now, horizontal middle, halfway to the lower edge, halfway from there to the lower edge, halfway from there to the lower edge, and even halfway from there to the lower edge. So you have five lines. This is a type 2 grid. So it's got one more line in your type 1 grid, one more horizontal line in your type 1 grid, right? Type 1 grid just has four lines halfway to the bottom. Type 2 grid has five. The type 1 grid also has two additional vertical lines halfway from the center to the line on each side. So halfway from the center to the line on the right, here it is. Halfway from the center to the line on the left, here it is. We extend the boundary lines so we can label them. And we do all our labeling outside the rectangle. Okay. Now I'm going to construct a graph of the quadratic function, okay? Quadratic shape. The rule here is start in the upper left corner. Oh yeah, I forget about it. Put the red dot where it went for the type 1 graph. Okay, right at the center of the lower edge, right where that center line hits the lower edge. Okay, now, first point is at the upper left. Then move one to the right and two down. One line to the right, two lines down, make a mark. Okay, then you're gonna do that two more times, one to the right, two down. Then you'll be at the red dot. And when you get to that, you, with the lower edge, you can't go down anymore. You're gonna go under the right and two up. Keep doing that. You already did it. Very good. Oh, I wasn't seeing your boundary line there. Okay, so everybody or almost everybody did that quickly and very well. Okay, it's easy. One line to the right, two lines down. One line to the right, two lines down. One to the right and two lines down. The reason we put that fifth line in there is so we could skip it. Okay, because otherwise the rule wouldn't work. Then one to the right and two lines up, one to the right, two lines up. Whoops, two lines up, and one to the right, and two lines up. And then we sketch really nice parabola. Okay? Make sense? Now we can label the boundary lines. Let's say this is x equals 4, and this is x equals 12, and this is y equals 10, and this is y equals 26. Okay. Now, from that information, you should be able to label the remaining lines. We don't have time for, there's not enough time left for me to give you time to do it, so I'm going to label them. Okay, from 4 to 12, well, either add 4 and 12, get 16, divide by 2, you get x equals 8. Or 12 minus 4 is 8, so half that distance is 4, so we go 4 to the right. You know, either way, you get it. And similarly here, you're going to go up here to 18, and then this is going to be 14. Well, it's y equals 18, y equals 14, y equals 12, y equals 11, and y equals 10 and a half. Okay. Now you should be able to do that. Numbers are easy. Make sure your arithmetic is up to it. And then down here, we're going to get halfway between 8 and 12 is 10. Halfway between 8 and 10 is 9. Halfway between 4 and 8 is 6. Halfway between 6 and 8 is 7. And now that you have your picture, we've got 2 minutes left, see if you can do this. I want you to draw the line for x equals 9.5. See where it hits the graph. And then draw your y equals line. Okay, so start with the line x equals 9.5 and draw a vertical line. Where's 9.5? Not going to be able to check it. I'll do it right at the end. So you have reference to it. You draw the line for x equals 9.5 and then estimate your y. I'm not giving you much time to do that. We're almost out of time. So you didn't get it okay, but here it is. Where's 9.5? It's between 9 and 10. So let's just do that in a slightly different color. Let's see if I get some white chalk. No, I've got it somewhere. Okay, there's x equals 9.5. That's this line. It meets the graph here. And our y line through this point. Y would be approximately, if I'd have drawn it straight, it'd be a little lower than that. I'm going to say about 12.4. Now that's an estimate. I use little wavy equal signs for estimates, especially from a hand-drawn graph. You don't expect it to be spectacular, although you'd be surprised how accurate you can be making estimates. Okay. Now there are formulas and equations you got to solve, all kinds of things that are involved with this picture. There's also the definition of a function, which I wanted to get to today, but we'll do it next time. Homework is be able to draw these graphs. And if I tell you where the boundary lines, figure out what the labels are. You come in, I'm going to ask you to do that for one graph or both. Okay? And everybody have different labels. So that, yeah. It'll be kind of randomized, but there'll be easy numbers to deal with. Not going to give you impossible arithmetic at this point. Oh man, this thing is blurry. Oh. I don't think it was.